in the morning, it can feel really challenging to try and stick with a daily routine, because the daily routines will only really work if your child is getting up at a consistent time. And a lot of the daily routines out there will kind of give you a 12-hour day. But if your child is up at the crack of dawn at 5 a.m. and you have a 12-hour day, then that's a 5 p.m. bedtime, which is going to mean that your child wakes even earlier. And it's just not possible. So in today's mini masterclass, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can manage your daytime routine if you have an early riser, and actually doing this may help them to sleep later. So if your child is waking up really early and you're trying to stick with awake periods and stick with a daily routine, everything happens really, really early, and that does include your bedtime. Now, if your child is under 6 months and they're on either the 1.5-hour maximum awake routine or the 2 hours maximum awake routine, you're just going to carry on doing that until bedtime. So it may be that you actually get an extra nap in during the day and you'll keep your bedtime somewhat consistent. Things get a little bit different when your child is over 6 months old. That's when their daytime routine really shifts. Now, I am a huge fan of the 2-3-4 routine. Awake for 2 hours, nap, awake for 3 hours, nap, awake for 4 hours, and then down for the night, with 3 hours total nap time sleep. Within those 2 naps, we have a 12-hour day. Gives us a 12-hour night. Now, most children are not actually sleeping for 12 hours at night, but we'll stick with a variation of 2-3-4, having our shortest awake period, then our medium, and then our longest at the end of the day. And that can work really, really well. But this only works if your child is getting up at a reasonable time and then they're going down at a reasonable time. If you're just trying to stick with 2-3-4 or variation of, and you're sticking with everything, all those timings, but you want to keep your bedtime consistent, 7-8 o'clock, you're going to end up with a really, really long awake period later in the day. That means your child is going to be really overtired, really overstimulated. It's going to actually be harder for them to sleep, and then they're more likely to wake even earlier the next morning. So we need to figure out how we can manage this. If your child has just got onto 2-3-4, around 6 months old, even anything up to 8 months old, you're probably going to have a cat nap in there anyway. In that last awake period, the longest awake period, you're going to have a cat nap. Take advantage of this. This is actually a way of extending your day out a little bit. A few rules with cat naps: that we want it just to be long enough to keep going until bedtime. Even if your child is on one nap, you may still be able to get them to take a cat nap, and that may actually help again to extend your day out a little bit. But cat naps can be really hard to take the older that your child gets. So we need to figure out exactly how we can be keeping them on this daytime schedule. Use the cat nap if you can. If you can actually get your child down for that nap, do. Cat nap doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be long enough to keep your child going until bedtime. And don't worry about having to do the perfect nap time routine or anything like that. You can just do an emergency nap. I call it an emergency nap, where you're just going to do whatever you need to do to get your child down. It may be that you're going to run some errands. You know that they'll fall asleep in the car, go for a walk, and they'll fall asleep in the carrier or the stroller. It can just then be easy for them to fall asleep, and you're just going to have that nap just long enough to keep going until bedtime. The longer, the later the nap, the later bedtime will be. If your child will not take a cat nap, then how can we stretch out our day a little bit? Well, you can stretch out each of the awake periods a little bit. So rather than just having a really long awake period at the end of the day, you can stretch out the awake periods a little bit for each of those. Much easier for your child to handle a little bit of overtiredness than a lot of overtiredness. That's probably the way to go if your child is taking 2 or more naps a day. If your child is only taking 1 nap a day, you're going to want to be really mindful of this, because if you're pushing your lunchtime nap, and that's when normally our 1 nap is, you're going to have an incredibly long awake period in the morning. Or if you stick with a shorter awake period, you have an incredibly long awake period in the afternoon. Push again a little bit. You want to make sure that your awake period just before you're going to get your child down to sleep is really calm and relaxed. We know your child is getting tired before they go down for their nap. If we've pushed them a little bit more, they really are tired. So you want to have a really calm, relaxing time before you're going to get your child down for their nap. They can nap a little bit earlier than you would ideally like. Normally our one nap a day is after lunch. If your child is going to be napping a little bit earlier, make sure that they're not going to be waking hungry, because they're napping through their lunchtime. Then they may be then waking hungry, and that's going to be a short nap because their tummy's rumbly and they're hungry. Have an early lunch or a snack before going down for their lunch. And then you're going to stretch out your awake period in the afternoon a little bit. Hopefully, though, working on these things will help your morning awake time. In the next video, in the video series, we're going to be looking at how we can really be encouraging your child to sleep later in the morning. So this is not something that you do need to perfect. You are going to be able to really help your child to sleep later. And this is something that is just going to be happening temporarily, but you working on your daytime routine, getting this consistent, can actually help them to sleep later as well. I'll see you in the next video.